Hi, I'm Lori. My dad once called me a mistake, behind my back, but that was just the beginning. They used my name, drained my money, then tried to take the one thing I built with my own hands. A home. Why would your own family go that far? What breaks first, the love or the trust? Before we dive in, tell me, have you ever been betrayed by the people who raised you? What would you do if your parents tried to erase you legally? What time are you listening to this, and where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. I'd really love to know. The hum of the city filtered in through my cracked window as I kicked off my heels, ready to collapse into the couch. My phone vibrated on the coffee table, flashing a name that made my stomach knot. Dad. I hesitated before answering, fatigue gnawing at the edges of my patience. "Hello?" I said, voice barely above a whisper. Static crackled. Then muffled voices. "She's a waste!" My father's voice broke through, coarse and unfiltered. "A mistake we should have never made." I froze. The air turned viscous, heavy in my chest. "Oh, come on, Wade," my mother said, her voice dripping with condescension, not comfort. "She tries. Pays the mortgage, doesn't she?" A dry laugh, sharp as glass. "That's the least she can do after bleeding us dry all these years." I didn't hang up. I didn't breathe. I sat there, absorbing every splintered word, each syllable carving deeper than the last. Then the call dropped into silence. Dead air. My hand shook as I set the phone down. The room pressed in around me, walls that once felt like safety now looming like witnesses. I wandered toward the old cedar chest tucked against the far wall. Dust coated its surface, the scent of aged wood wafting up as I pried it open. A scrapbook, some old certificates, loose photos, and tucked underneath it all, a leather-bound diary with Darla's name etched faintly on the cover. I opened it. Pages yellowed with time-whispered secrets never meant for me. "She'll never be like the others," one entry read. "Too sensitive, too needy, a drain on what little we have left." Another passage, colder. "If only I hadn't been so foolish to think a second child could fix things." My stomach lurched. The knot in my chest tightened into something sharper, an ache I couldn't massage away. 16 years ago, I remembered, standing alone on my 8th grade graduation stage, clutching my certificate while they smiled wider for my brother's soccer trophies than for my straight A's. Every slight, every sigh, every backhanded comment that once stung but didn't scar, suddenly they weren't random. They were deliberate, designed. I dropped the diary onto the couch and stared blankly at the dark TV screen, my reflection fractured in the black. My chest burned, but not from sadness anymore. If I was such a burden, if I was such a mistake, maybe it was time they found out exactly who had been keeping their world from falling apart. I straightened my spine, the fatigue evaporating like mist under a rising sun. My mind sharpened, clicking into a gear it hadn't touched in years. No more guilt. No more waiting for love they had no intention of giving. Not anymore. The fluorescent lights in my office buzzed faintly, a white noise backdrop to my gnawing thoughts. I sat at my desk, trying to lose myself in quarterly reports and launch plans, but every email, every knock at my door made me flinch. Paranoia slithered under my skin. It wasn't just the phone call anymore. It was something worse, something growing. I overheard 2 junior developers whispering by the coffee machine. One lowered his voice, but the words reached me anyway. They knew about the rollout before the meeting. It's like someone's feeding them inside info. My chest tightened. The competitor had mirrored our last product pitch almost verbatim. I told myself it was coincidence, market trends, anything logical. But deep down, I knew better. Patterns don't lie. People do. The memory of Dad's dismissive sneer flickered through my mind like static. "She'll never be anything." His voice, lodged like a splinter, made it impossible to ignore the growing dread. Could he? Logic warred with instinct. No father would destroy his daughter's career, right? I stayed late that night, the building hollow and humming around me. Heart pounding, I logged into our internal systems, bypassing layers I had no business breaching. I traced access logs, email threads, permissions. My hands moved on their own, cold, methodical. There it was. Attached to an unassuming file, an IP address pinged back to an old device still registered to my family's name. Dad's name. My breath hitched. I dug deeper, clicking through strings of forwarded confidential plans, straight to a competitor's inbox. Not passive neglect, not emotional withholding, active sabotage. He hadn't just thought I was a mistake, he wanted to ensure I stayed one. The bile in my throat rose faster than I could swallow it back. I printed the email chain, each sheet a paper-thin betrayal, stacking them into a trembling pile on my desk. I stared at them, heart thundering, fingers curled so tightly around the last page it crinkled at the edges. 16 years ago, I remembered standing outside my high school gym, clutching the JV basketball MVP trophy, while Dad praised my brother's real sports career to anyone who would listen. Back then, it hurt. Now, it clarified. This wasn't new. It wasn't accidental. It was calculated, deliberate, vicious. I sat alone in the sterile office, the city lights bleeding into pale lines across the carpet. The old Lori, the one who waited for apologies that would never come, would have crumbled. But that Lori had died the minute she heard herself called a mistake. "You started this war, Dad," I whispered, voice steady despite the tremor rippling through my hands. "I'm going to end it. No more second chances, no more swallowed pride, only strategy now." The manila envelope sat heavy on my kitchen counter, its presence louder than the hum of the fridge or the ticking of the old wall clock. I didn't have to open it to know what it was. Legal notifications always carried a certain weight, not just in paper, but in consequence. I slid it open with a butter knife, unfolding the documents with a detached hand. Halfway through the first page, my stomach knotted. I wasn't just ignored this time. I had been legally erased. My grandfather's estate, the one he once whispered would always have a place for you, kiddo, had been altered. My name, struck out, my share, redirected. And the date? 3 years ago. The betrayal wasn't fresh. It had been fermenting, quietly molding into something rotten, all while they smiled through family dinners and hollow Christmases. The phone rang, a shrill crack in the oppressive quiet. I didn't want to answer. I already knew who it was. "Lori, sweetheart," came the panicked voice of our family lawyer, Greg Wilkes. "Listen, I didn't know Darla was moving this fast. She's liquidating the properties. Everything's being signed over to private buyers." The walls shifted around me, my balance tipping. "When?" I managed to croak out. "Tomorrow morning. First batch closes at noon. If you want to contest it, you'll need to act fast. Of course, cut me out, sell it off, bury the bones." Simple. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just hung up and grabbed my keys. Driving downtown was a blur. I wasn't seeing the city anymore. I was seeing memories superimposed onto every street corner. 16 years ago, standing under the leaking gym roof as my parents rushed past me to congratulate my cousin on her new job. Not a glance spared for my acceptance letter to college. Not a word. Some scars don't scream when they break open again. They just bleed silently. The property office was closed when I arrived. Too late. A cruel finality settled in my bones. I sat in my office long after everyone else left, the blue glare of the city lights staining my reflection in the window. Family photos lined the bookshelf behind me, smiling faces frozen in time, brittle lies trapped under glass. I stared at one of them. 4th of July picnic. Dad's hand gripping my shoulder just a little too hard. Mom's tight-lipped smile. Me, plastered with pretend happiness like a clown at someone else's party. Every favor, every emergency fund, every time I dropped everything for them. A ledger of sacrifices none of them ever asked for, but that they took without hesitation. They didn't just cut me out. They made sure there was nothing left to return to. I turned back to the envelope, folded the documents neatly, set them aside. From this moment forward, there would be no more debts, no more emotional bankruptcy. I stood up slowly, every muscle stiff with cold certainty. I whispered into the empty room, a quiet vow to the girl in the photograph, and to the woman staring back from the glass. From now on, I owe them nothing. The knock on my door came sharp and quick, the kind of knock that doesn't ask, it demands. When I opened it, 2 police officers stood there, badges gleaming under the porch light. My breath hitched, instincts screaming before my mind caught up. "Ms. Keegan?" the taller one asked. "We need to ask you a few questions regarding an incident at one of your properties." I blinked. What incident? Inside the precinct, under flickering fluorescents that buzzed like angry insects, I sat frozen as they laid it all out. Illegal party, underage drinking, drug possession, property damage. And the kicker? The deed traced back to my LLC, Trent. I didn't need to be told. I saw it unfolding in my mind like a movie I couldn't turn off. He must have used the vacant rental, easy access, no oversight, and now it was all tied to me, legally and publicly. I gritted my teeth, feeling the walls inching closer. 16 years ago, I remembered Dad bailing Trent out of a shoplifting charge, calling it boys being boys, while lecturing me about not embarrassing the family. History doesn't just repeat, it evolves into something meaner. The officers finally let me go, pending further investigation. As I stepped out into the humid night, my phone buzzed. It was a message from one of Trent's idiot friends. "Don't worry, your dad's handling it. He's still got pull." I drove to the property at dawn. Beer bottles littered the lawn, windows broken, graffiti sprayed across the garage door. Freedom Party 2025. The damage was cosmetic. The real wreckage was legal. If charges stuck, it wouldn't be Trent's record on the line, it would be mine. Later that afternoon, an official letter arrived. Negligence, failure to maintain a safe property, liability, and Trent? Wade? Not a word of apology, not a call. I sat in my car outside the police station again, the interior stale and suffocating. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles blanched. There was no bottom to how low they would sink to protect him and scapegoat me. No betrayal too obscene if it kept their golden boy clean. For a moment, sadness prickled at the edges, the old instinct to mourn what could have been. But it burned off fast, scorched by something colder, sharper. I wasn't the little girl hoping for a pat on the head anymore. I wasn't the dutiful daughter swallowing disrespect because family comes first. Family chose, and so would I. I pulled out my phone, voice steady as a scalpel as I called my attorney. "Prepare everything," I said, watching the sky darken beyond the windshield. "They think they're clever. Let's show them what clever really looks like." The first move had been made. My phone buzzed as I reviewed the damage estimates from the party Trent hosted. Legal bills, repair invoices, my lawyer's cautious emails warning me about potential liability. I hadn't even finished skimming the final line when the screen lit up again. "Mom." I almost didn't answer, but a thread of curiosity pulled at me. Maybe it was hope. Maybe I just wanted to hear how far she'd spin this one. "Lori," she whispered, voice cracked like old porcelain. I didn't know who else to call. I said nothing. She inhaled shakily. "I saw the tests. It's cancer, late stage. I just thought you should know." There it was, the performance, the tremble, the pause, the well-timed sob. If I hadn't grown up with Darla Harlan, I might have believed her, but I knew her tells. And they were all there, dancing across every syllable. Still, part of me wanted to be wrong. So I played along. "How long?" I asked. "They're saying maybe 6 months, less, if it spreads." She sniffled. "I'm not asking for much. Just be here. Help me get through this. We're still family." That word again. Family. They wore it like a mask when it suited them. When it didn't, I was disposable. After we hung up, I called the hospital. I wasn't dramatic about it, just gave her name, birth date, the usual. The woman on the line put me on hold for a beat too long, then came back sounding polite, but clipped. "We don't have any record of a Darla Harlan receiving a cancer diagnosis or any recent testing here." I thanked her calmly before ending the call. Then, I stared at the phone in my lap, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. 16 years ago, I remembered watching Mom console Trent after he broke a neighbor's window, her hands rubbing his back, voice soft. The next day, I brought home a B+ in math and got silence. Forgiveness was something she rationed out. Affection, too. But guilt? Guilt she served by the gallon. This wasn't about cancer. It was about control. I leaned back in my chair, eyes tracing the rain sliding down my window. The fake concern, the manipulations, the lies dressed in motherly concern. They were all weapons, just quieter than Wade's. But this time, I wasn't reaching for them. I opened my messages and typed slowly. You chose your side. Send. I paused, fingers hovering over the screen. So did I. Send. Then I set the phone down and exhaled. Not in relief, but in release. The masquerade was broken. The guilt had expired. And I was done pretending it ever held any value. I had seen pettiness. I had swallowed pride. But this was war. The envelope was thick, formal, and reeking of arrogance. Wade's attorney had it hand-delivered to my office. Not emailed, not mailed, delivered. Because intimidation was always his first language. The accusation? Fraud. Specifically, that I had tricked my dying parents into signing over the house. His words, not mine. My breath didn't hitch. My hands didn't shake. I read the complaint like I was skimming a grocery list. But inside, something ancient and cold settled in my chest. The hearing was set within the week. Wade wanted this to move quickly. I could almost hear his voice behind it. She won't fight. She never fights back. He still didn't get it. The Lori he knew had vanished somewhere between the betrayal and the silence that followed. I showed up to court alone. He didn't. Wade sat at the front, dressed like a general waiting for surrender. Darla beside him, eyes vacant. Trent behind them, bored. A family portrait of denial. The allegations were read aloud. How I had manipulated them, used legal tricks, coerced signatures. A fabrication so polished it gleamed. I didn't blink. When it was over, I met my attorney in the hallway. He handed me a folder. It's worse than we thought, he said. Inside, server logs, email traces, and one damning trail. Wade had hired someone to hack my financial accounts. He wasn't just trying to discredit me, he wanted to destroy me. You want to press charges? My attorney asked. I stared down the hallway where Wade was laughing, smug and oblivious. Absolutely. 16 years ago, I remembered him yelling at me in front of my friends at a school event, calling me dramatic when I cried. You're too emotional to be trusted, he'd sneered. Now I'd weaponize that same silence he once mocked. I filed the countersuit the next morning. Ownership claims backed by legal evidence, bank records, email receipts. My cybersecurity team had everything. Wade's signature was all over the digital assault. Later that week, my attorney leaned in before we stepped into court again. It's your move. I adjusted my collar, stepped forward without hesitation. Across the room, Wade looked up and smiled. I smiled back. Checkmate's coming. The knock came at 8:04 a.m. sharp. Not the kind that waited politely. It was deliberate, methodical. Final. I watched from the upstairs window as the process server walked down the driveway, a folder under his arm and no emotion on his face. Darla opened the door. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the change in her posture. Shoulders sagged. Her mouth hung slightly open. She closed the door without saying anything. By noon, it was official. The Harlan home, my home, was no longer theirs. The court had ruled. Every twisted signature, every forged paper, every fabricated accusation had been dissected and demolished in front of a judge. I didn't celebrate. The word victory never quite fit. It felt like digging my own house out of a landslide and calling it renovation. Later that evening, Wade released a statement to the local news. A carefully crafted lie. Our daughter exploited us. We were sick. We were manipulated. This has broken our family. Darla added her own variation. We just wanted peace. We never thought she'd turn on her own blood. Trent posted online. Hope she's proud of evicting her own dying mother. It took less than 2 hours for people to start whispering, but I had come prepared. My lawyer sent out the full record, scanned documents, testimony, audio recordings, digital evidence. The truth in black and white, no drama, just facts. And slowly, like oil burning off a cold skillet, the heat turned. Sympathy flickered back toward me. I watched it all unfold from my kitchen table, a cup of cold coffee in my hand, and silence wrapping around me like an old coat. The next morning, moving trucks arrived at the Harlan house. Boxes were taped with trembling fingers. Wade barked orders like it was a military evacuation. Darla wept quietly by the porch railing. Trent cursed at every mover who walked too slow or touched the wrong thing. I didn't go over. I didn't wave. I just watched. 16 years ago, I stood on the front steps holding my backpack, waiting for a ride that never came. My parents had forgotten my college orientation. They said they were busy with Trent's court hearing. That morning came back like a ghost. The final truck pulled away by sunset. I walked across the yard. The door was still unlocked. Empty rooms echoed when I stepped inside. Scratches on the floor where furniture had been dragged. A dusty cross still hanging askew in the hallway. I whispered into the quiet. Time to rebuild. Alone. The courier's shoes crunched across the Harlan driveway, sharp against the quiet morning. From the second-story window, I watched the envelope exchange hands, the slight recoil in Darla's face when she read the heading. Notice to vacate. Final order. They didn't slam the door this time. There was no rage, no grandstanding, just the sound of retreat, of losing. I stayed in my car across the street, engine off, parked beneath the same tree where Dad taught Trent to throw a football. Back then, I had asked for a turn. Wade told me, "Don't waste time, Lori. Let your brother learn to lead." Now he was the one being let out. By noon, movers had arrived, boxes, battered furniture, a microwave with duct tape across its front. Trent cursed at everything: gravity, cardboard, air. I wasn't surprised when Wade tried to spin it. That evening, my phone buzzed with an alert. Local news. A video clip. Wade standing on his old porch, a practiced tremble in his voice. Our daughter took everything, lied, manipulated. We tried to protect our home, but she turned on us. Darla chimed in. She's not who you think she is. She's cold. She's dangerous. The public murmur started within hours. Comments online. A few vague messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. But this time, I had receipts. My attorney sent everything: ownership transfers, recordings, legal timelines, to every outlet that covered Wade's story. I didn't shout. I didn't plead. I just let the truth do its work. By morning, the narrative flipped. The footage of Wade testifying under oath, the hacker logs, Darla's fake cancer story. One headline read, "Daughter wins lawsuit. Parents tried to steal her home." I didn't smile. Vindication is rarely sweet. It's cold, like glass after rain. I returned to the house 2 days later, empty now, walls stripped, corners dusty. A single shoe left behind in the hallway like a forgotten lie. 16 years ago, I sat on these same stairs waiting for someone to say they were proud of me. No one ever did. This time, I didn't wait for approval. I didn't ask permission. I stood in the center of the living room, arms loose at my sides, silence curling like smoke around me. From behind, the sound of the last moving truck pulling away. I didn't turn to watch it go. I whispered to the walls, not to them, but to myself. Time to rebuild, alone. The house was quiet now. No raised voices. No lies echoing down the hallway. Just me and the sound of my own footsteps on the hardwood floor. It felt bigger somehow, emptier, but also cleaner. The walls no longer held their secrets, just dust. I stood in the middle of the living room, sunlight pouring in through the front windows, catching the specks floating in the air. The kind of stillness that used to make me anxious now wrapped itself around me like a long-delayed exhale. There was no satisfaction in winning, not really. The courts had ruled, the truth had been exposed, and the last box belonging to the Harlans had disappeared down the road behind a moving truck. But all I felt was tired. Free, yes, but tired. I wandered into what used to be my mother's sewing room. It was bare now, except for an old drawer left behind. Inside was a photo, me at 10, holding a school science trophy, a forced smile painted across my face. No one else was in the picture. I sat down on the floor and stared at it. So many battles. So much silence. And through it all, I kept hoping someone would reach out, would say, "We were wrong." But they never did. Maybe they never will. Still, I had no regrets about what I'd done. They gave me no choice. Cleaning the house felt strange at first. I wasn't erasing memories. I was reclaiming space. My space. Every swept corner and wiped down window wasn't about closure. It was about rebuilding, from the inside out. The letter came 3 days later. It wasn't from Wade, or Darla, or Trent. It was from a woman in Austin who had read about the case. She ran a nonprofit for women rebuilding their lives after betrayal, financial ruin, or abuse. She wanted to meet, to collaborate, to help others climb out of what I had just escaped. I stared at the letter for a long time. I didn't cry, but my hands trembled a little, like maybe, just maybe, something good could grow from the ash. The next morning, I stood at the threshold, keys in one hand, coffee in the other. The house smelled of lemon oil and fresh paint, no longer haunted. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking away from anything. I was walking toward something. I locked the door behind me, the final click slicing clean through the past. Not every scar needs to vanish. Some become armor. Sometimes breaking away isn't about anger, it's about survival. I spent years chasing approval from people who never intended to give it. What I've learned is this: family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect, by boundaries, and by truth. You don't owe loyalty to those who weaponize love. So if you're watching this and you're carrying guilt that doesn't belong to you, let it go. If you've been called a burden, ask yourself who really needed who. And if you're rebuilding brick by brick, know this: you're not alone. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from someone you once called family? What did freedom feel like for you? If this story touched you, comment 1 or tell me what city you're watching from. If it didn't, I'd still love to hear your perspective. What would you have done differently? And hey, if you believe in stories that dig deep, that speak truth and strength, hit subscribe. More is coming. You won't want to miss what's next.